Hello! Today I thought I'd share my 7 favourite books that I read in 2017 with you. 7, just because those were the 7 that stick in my mind, popped out at me. Of course, as with all of these review videos of the year, these are not the 7 books published in 2017 that I liked the best, but just the ones that were my highlights of the year. My 7th favourite book of 2017, I guess, was The Chimes by Smaill. This is quite unique. It really struck a chord with me because I thought, oh, come on, sit down. My dog's very clingy because I was away over Christmas and she was with my mum, so now she wants to be close to me, which I can't blame her for. The Chimes by Smaill is a dystopian novel set in a world in which people can't form memories, or only in a very limited way. They hold on to memories by sort of trinkets and small items that they then sort of endow the memory onto. But most importantly for the story and also this world is that communication is very difficult if you can't form any memories, so the way people communicate is often through song and melody. And that was just really uniquely executed in this book. I think the author is also a musician by training, and she uses all this sort of lovely musical vocabulary, which I really liked because I grew up playing classical piano, and those words, even though they are used to describe musical pieces, actually also work to describe how someone walks, or even a way silence sounds. So I just thought it was really magical in that way. The story itself wasn't that much and has a sort of small little adventure plot trying to find out what's happened, and of course there's sort of a baddie in some form. But really, just really beautiful somehow. It also has a really nice love story at the centre of it, even though it's not the main plot point, if that makes sense. So I really recommend it, especially maybe for someone who wants to slightly dabble outside of the sort of younger fiction dystopian novels that there are, because this one I think would work for both someone who's a bit snotty and uppity about YA and also someone who wants to explore not just teenagey angstiness, but also other aspects of a dystopian novel. So I thought this was great. The second, now I have to do math, so 6th favourite, I'm just like leading up to my favourite, book that I read was The Sellout by poor Beatty. This is not a book that I would have grabbed by myself, or for myself necessarily, even though it won Booker and la la la, great claim. This was a book that we read in my book club though. So sometimes other people's taste pushes you to discover great new things. This one I just liked so much because I think it was so different. It's very satirical. At the centre of the story is a black man somewhere in a very small town in America who almost finds his sort of political calling when he discovers that his hometown is in danger of falling off the map. And he does crazy things like reinstating slavery in modern day as a black man, and then succeeds to put his town back on the map, which is what he wants. The ideas are slightly bonkers, the characters are excellent, and the main character is, although not likeable, scarily relatable at times in his thoughts. The author makes fun of loads of side characters, but it's not, how do I say this? It's not like light comedy. It's just really perfectly executed satire, and I thought it was a very clever book. I think I missed quite a lot of references because a lot of it is so much situated in the American context. There's a lot of references to sort of American pop culture, which I think just went over my head. And I still enjoyed it. So I think an American audience, or just someone who is slightly less oblivious about the US than me, would enjoy this even more, which is already difficult because I loved it. The next book that I would like to recommend, although I can't wholeheartedly recommend it for absolutely everyone, is Hot Milk by Deborah Levy. This is a small little book about a young woman who travels to, well, that's amazing, I'm not sure anymore, Spain, somewhere in Spain, I think, with her mother, because her mother has some ailment, disease, or maybe it's just psychosomatic problem with her legs, and finds that she can't walk every now and then. They go to Spain to meet a medical specialist, and that's the story, basically. Not that much happens. They meet this doctor who's a bit weird. She befriends a couple randomly on the beach, which is also all a bit weird, and really there's not much plot, but something about this really grabbed me. Also, I mentioned when I talked about this book earlier in the year, I really think it spoke to a younger person who feels slightly lost in these beginning stage, well, not beginning stages, that's making me younger than I am, stages of adulthood and determining your own path in life and feeling very lost. Also, once you've sort of passed your teenage years, how do you deal with your parents? How do you form a new relationship with your parents that in a way says goodbye to your old parent-child dynamic? And maybe all those things were just things that I read into the plot, and because it is a very contemplative, open plot, I think you are free to put your own thoughts into it, and that just worked really well for me in Hot Milk by Deborah Levy. The fourth book that I would really like to recommend, and I really enjoyed this year, was The Power of the Dog by Thomas Savage. This is set in, again, an American small town, I guess, and centres, oh, bad timing, dog, power of the dog, literally. Yeah, well, comfortable. I'm quite enjoying this. This who is it even about? It's about two brothers who own a farm. One of the brothers is a not terribly intelligent but nice enough guy who feels increasingly lonely, being surrounded just by his brother and the farmhands. And his brother is a horrible, intelligent sadist. And the two brothers have spent most of their time sort of trucking along together, and the former brother meets a woman and marries her. She has a young son from a previous, previous marriage, but she's a widow. I'm doing such a bad job of describing this book. It's about these two brothers battling it out in very different ways when this new woman arrives at their farm, and how the teenage boy sort of gets caught up in it all. Again, this is really not a plot-driven book, but it's just so dark and quite luscious in its dark tones. It's not as simple as the good brother and the bad brother, and it's not a sort of gory explanation of how sadistic the older brother is. It's just quite thrilling, and you care a great load for the wife, I found. And it's really one of these books that, even though it's not a thriller, it is kind of about the ending, and you have no clue how it's going to end. And I just really thought it was excellent. Also, I just thought the whole book was very pleasing. It's all very, for the sort of broody day. And for some reason it really stuck with me. Then the next book I don't have in physical copy, which I'm quite sad about really. It's a short story collection called Stories of Your Life and Others by, is it Ted Chiang? And this is an excellent collection of short stories, which I will not say very often. And all the stories centre around somewhere around science fiction and speculative fiction. So there's really the myriad going from a sort of alternate universe where people can choose to not see other people's attractiveness and what that does to a society that is so obsessed with looks and beauty. There's a story about a guy who undergoes experimental medical treatment after suffering, I don't remember now, a stroke, something like that, and becomes hyper intelligent. It's all the stories are great short stories. They really don't leave you unsatisfied, but they all feel like they could have been in stories in their own right. And even if you're not a science fiction nut, I think this book can really speak to so many people, because it also criticizes so many current societal problems and issues. So if you want the more sort of real life spin on these questions, you will totally get them. Stories of Your Life and Others really spoke to me, which is so rare because I don't tend to be crazy about short stories. And then my 6th and 7th favourite book this year, to me, amusingly, have one thing in common, almost. My 6th favourite book, which I won't have to talk that much about, but still I am thrilled that I finally read it, is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, of course. What do I even say about this? Obviously, it's about Elizabeth Bennet, who is driven by her prejudice and almost limited in her interactions with other people because she is so quick to judge others. And it is about Mr. Darcy, who is the personification of pride, and how these seemingly unsuitable people find true love. That's what it's about on the surface, and that is also the story that I knew without having read the book, but it was so much easier to read. I was put off because I thought it would be sort of stuffy Old English, and it really isn't. I thought it was really humorous in how dialogue between different characters is depicted, and how there's sort of sly, under the hand comments and opinions that shine through, even though people are trying to be oh so polite and well behaved. I thought the 4 other sisters next to Elizabeth were all just good characters, not nice necessarily, but just interesting characters, this array of these 5 very different sisters, and I really enjoyed it. I thought I wouldn't, and I think I'm rating it so highly, not just because it's an all-time favourite classic of so many people, but also because I was so positively surprised. I really set out not expecting to enjoy Pride and Prejudice, and I thought it was great. And my favourite book of 2017, even though I like all these books for very different reasons, is Fitz and Furies by Groff, and that's also what amuses me about the parallel to Pride and Prejudice, because Fitz and Furies, again, we have in this case a married couple, and the first half of the book is from the perspective, I guess, of the one party, which is Fates, and I don't know why I'm showing you this, and the other is Furies, and it's similar to Pride and Prejudice in as much as the two individuals in this relationship are very different, and their different outlook on life and relationships and what they value in life also influences how they feel about the relationship, which I thought was fascinating. It also has some elements of making fun of the upper class, which, again, I'm not forcefully trying to find parallels between Pride and Prejudice and Fitz and Furies. They're very different books, don't think otherwise. But those elements, I think, do hint towards what kind of book I like. I like character-driven plots. I am more interested in relationships than action. And Fitz and Furies so masterfully shows how the life that we lead and the experiences that we make accumulate and result in the kind of person we are in adult life, and how we might suffer as well from negative experiences because we can't really shake that side of us also when we end up in our sort of a chosen romantic relationship. This really touched me. I thought the characters were really, really interesting. And I recommend it to anyone who wants to read a good book. This just was a really good book for me. On the whole, 2017 was a weird reading year. I'm going to now film a video with my most disappointing reads, and I had a lot of middle of the road so-so books, which I find disappointing. I'd rather read extremes than just sort of dabble down the middle. But all of those 7 books were not middle of the road books. These were all very special in their own way, and there's so much you could talk about with these books as well, which really shows how excellent they are. I hope you haven't read all of these books and you can now venture out and read them. Let me know which one tempts you the most, or if you have read any of these, which ones you thought were great, or break my heart and tell me that you hated them. I hope you had a really, really good Christmas and are looking forward to New Year's Eve now, for which I will not be leaving my dog because I'm afraid she'll be afraid with all the fireworks going on. So have a very happy New Year. Guten Rutsch, as we Germans like to say, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.